Yo, what you saying, Jay here? I just want to make a quick video on how to loop. I would probably say this video is more for the guys starting out, or probably anywhere up to 1,000 hours. At the end of the day, there's a lot of people out there that still don't know how to loop properly. There's two absolute major things that you need to learn in order to be able to loop correctly. Obviously, there's a lot of variables. Every killer has a different power, and due to that power, certain killers can avoid you from throwing pallets, chucking pallets, vaulting, that type of stuff. So against every killer, you will loop everything ever so slightly different. If it's just a complete basic killer, the way I'm going to show you how to loop is the way you're going to want to do it every time. Otherwise, you're just going to have to adjust to the way the killer plays. It's too difficult to go over every scenario. There's endless possibilities, especially if you add in the fact that the killer can mind game. They can take very specific routes to cut you off or catch you off guard. I can't, we're unable to go through all of those endless scenarios, but the very least I can teach you how to loop properly and at least increase your skill level. Yeah, let's get straight into it. Alright, so let's get straight into it. So, as I mentioned in the intro, there is two major things that you need to learn. Now, one of them is looping as tightly as possible. Now, if you're not looping as tightly as possible, right, you actually aren't gaining the maximum amount of distance as possible. This takes a lot of practice, right? Obviously, I'm on console, so it is slightly harder to do. The guys on PC have a massive advantage over us guys on console. However, you can still be really good and not need mouse and keyboard. The biggest downside is being able to 360. We can somewhat do it, but nowhere near to the same extent, and it's not as smooth. Anyways, so yeah, one of the major things, right, is looping as tightly as possible, right? The moment that you learn to do that, essentially you need to, especially if you're on console, I don't really know how mouse and keyboard works, to be honest. I've never played on PC, but it's a combination of using your left analog stick in the direction you want to go and panning your camera with the right analog stick in the direction that you're going, right? That's basically all it is. So looping as tightly as possible is going to give you the maximum amount of distance. However, there's something more important than that I believe than looping as tightly as possible, which is looking behind you. If you're unable to look behind you during chase, anytime you're going to change obstacles, so for instance, if the killer's following you this way and you don't know which way they're taking, that could be one of three ways in this instance. So it could be to go around, to follow you right through, or to go around the outside, which they'd have no reason to do in this scenario. But yeah, there's three ways. If you don't know which way they're going, there's no point in hugging the obstacle as tightly as possible, because, oh wow, bang, you've been hit because he's cut you off. So I think, in my opinion, looking behind you is actually the most important thing, which allows you to be able to then loop properly and then learn how to hug all obstacles as tightly as you can. So practice looking behind you first of all. There's multiple ways to do this, so you need to be able to do it consistently and often. So looking behind you, you don't want to be crashing into things. If you crash into things, that's a problem. Now, when you're actually looking behind you, right, you don't want to look all the time. Yeah, you don't want to do it. You don't want to just constantly look behind you and run forward, unless the only scenario where that would actually be worth it, looking behind you the whole time, right, is, for instance, if you're coming up to a vault, you've lined yourself up, you know you're going to hit it, and you vault it. That's the only time it's actually acceptable to look behind you like that at any given scenario. That's the only time. Vice versa, if you're coming up to it this way, you know, you want to look behind you, and then you come through the window. And the only reason you would do that is just to check if you're going to get hit or not. Because, again, I suppose if you're coming from this way, and you're looking behind you, right, you can fake this, and then keep running. I got stuck there. That's another acceptable scenario to constantly look behind you, but there's never really a reason to, right? So, once you're able to look behind you, so if you're running, right, just do quick turns, yeah? Just quick turns. It is, again, it's easier to do it on PC, but quick turns, and that's enough for you to understand your distance, what direction that they're going, and what direction you want to go. So we'll start off with one of the hardest loops in the game. It's the T&L wall. It's hard because it's easily mind gameable, and yeah, there's not a huge amount you can do. There's no pallet, there's no safe pallet at the end of it, so you gotta hope for the best. There's one optimal way to run this loop, right? And it's like this. So the killer's behind you, you're running into the loop like this. So look behind you, you're fine. You vault this side. In an ideal world, you want the killer to come around out this side, which just allows you to run this way and come here. Once you get to this point again, optimally, what you want is the killer to go around the outside. So you've just vaulted this window and you come through. So this is what that would look like if the killer played it correctly. Oh well, you were able to run it correctly rather, because the killer's never going to let you do that. So what happens now? The killer's never going to run it that way, ever, in any scenario. And if he does, then good for you, but you know the killer isn't very good, or they're new, or whatever. So what's going to happen, right, is you're going to be running from this way, going to look behind you, you know you can make the vault, you're still looking behind you so that you know which way he's cutting you off at, right, and he goes round this way. By the time that you get to here, he could have already moonwalked back there and cut you off, and he'd be about here. Yeah, you're getting hit. You're probably going to get hit. So the only thing that you can do in that scenario is try and get a 360, which I'm not really going to cover. But you follow around. Yeah, you don't make the loop. You pretend you're going for it, and hopefully he swings, he misses you, and then we probably still don't make it anywhere else, honestly. But it buys an extra few seconds. Yeah, that is the T&L wall. That is what it's going to consist of. You come over here. He's going to come all the way around there. Possibly mind game you, and then give you here. But he's probably then going to cut you off here, make you go this way. So this is very risky, but you can try and get the vault here. But then he can very quickly just moonwalk back the way and get a hit. So it's a complete 50-50. Honestly, you've got to think ahead of what the killer's going to do. But at the end of the day, don't get upset if you can't run a killer on a T&L wall. It's very difficult to do, and 9 times out of 10, if you successfully outrun a killer on a T&L wall, it was probably luck and not much skill involved. So that's this tile. Let's move to the next. Alright, Shack. So there's only one correct way to run this, right? And this is coming in from the non-pallet side. If you come in from, we'll go over what happens if you come in from the pallet side in a bit. But what you want, killer chasing you, come in here. What you do is you stop roughly about here. Keep moving forward though, yeah. So come in, keep moving forward. L1, fast vault. If he follows you in there. L1's for PlayStation. What would it be? LB for Xbox. But I've changed up my controls so that I don't have an issue with throwing pallets and healing at the same time. So yeah, come in here, killer follows you in, you get a fast vault, and you're through. Now, what they'll probably do, right, is he'll either vault the window and you come around this side, yeah, and you repeat the process, or what might happen is he comes round this side. So what you do is you get about this much distance, wait for his red light, and then you fast vault. There is a couple of variables though. For instance, as you're following in here, if the killer pretends to come in and then goes round the outside, don't vault. Try and leave the vault for as long as possible. And if he does go round the outside, what you want to do is you want to stand right here, finger on your running button, whatever it is for you, ready for the fast vault. You're sitting roughly about here, right? I can see the door, I can see the window. If he comes round the window, you run this side, and if not, if he comes back in, you can just get the fast vault and you're through. And then you repeat the process. That is essentially how you run Shack. You are forced to go whatever way the killer wants you to at the end of the day, but that is the correct way to do it, and you should be fine. So if you come from the pallet side, what I would suggest doing is, especially if there's 4 or 5 gens left and you're healthy, don't chuck that pallet if you're going to get hit at it. It's just not worth it. Don't chuck it. If you're healthy and you're not playing against a one-shot down killer, here's what I would actually recommend doing, right? Depending on the distance you've got, if you've got a fair amount of distance, right, What I would do is I would run all the way through and I would come round the back end and reset the loop the way that the killer would if they cut you off that way. And then you can vault. If you don't have enough distance, I actually would still do exactly that same scenario. Run all the way through. Especially if you're learning, because if you come in through the pallet and you try to take the window, there's only one correct way to do so, right? And if you get the window, you're lucky. Because what'll happen is the killer sees you running in, right? You go to take the window, yeah, and he's just going to cut you off. He's just going to go around there, and you absolutely don't make it all the way around to get back in here. So, at the end of the day, if you're healthy and it's not a one-shot down killer, then either way, you probably will still play it the same. However, if you do decide to take the window from the pallet, here's what I would always suggest doing. Every time until you've done it at least once, and then, yeah, it becomes a mind game. So here's what I would do, right? So I would come in, I'd pretend to fake the window, I'd come back out, and as soon as he shows his red light again, I'd go back in. Every single time without fail. Never vault the first time. Because 9 times out of 10, the killer's going to try and cut you off, and then when they go back in, they come all the way in, you vault the window, and then they have to go all the way around, and then what happens is you actually get all the way around Shack, right, and then you can absolutely reset the loop. So that's what I'd recommend doing. That's how to play Shack. Let's move on to the next. Okay, so we come to our first jungle gym. This is a good loop. It is quite easily mind gameable. Don't think that's a word, but you can quite easily get caught out here. So again, here's the right way to run this, yeah? So killer's chasing you, you come in at the window side, you vault the window, you check which way he's coming. You want him to come around this way, so you come round, right? You go through the pallet and you repeat the process. He comes, he follows you through the pallet, right? You vault the window and you're fine. However, again, guys, that instance is more likely to happen than at the T&L wall we talked about earlier. Running that the right way, that is never going to happen after the first vault. But this is actually more likely to happen, to be honest, especially if the killer thinks they're going to catch up with you. Now, here's a couple of things that you can do to make this loop a bit better or more within your favour. So, if you come in this side, right, and you vault, it's probably going to try and cut you off and come around this side. So, immediately after vaulting, you can do this. Right, you can fast vault the window, and then you go straight back over. 9 times out of 10, they will commit to this side, they'll see you, and they'll either vault the window to try and get you, or they'll come all the way around. And now that forces you to loop this wall. Right? If the killer goes this way, and goes all the way around the pallet to try and cut you off, I would kind of recommend coming to about here. If you see his red stain, just run back and repeat the process. If you don't see his red stain though, however, he doesn't want you to get the window again and he's probably coming this way. So I would just commit. At the end of the day, it is mind games. The killer can hide his red stain, and to be honest with you, there's not all the time there's something you're going to be able to do about it. So yeah, that is exactly how I would run that jungle gym. There is other things that you can do as well, depending on what side you come in from. So if you come in from this side, right, you can come in here. You can come in here. He will probably follow you. You can fake going around that way and look the window, or vault the window rather. When you get to this point, I would stay here to decide which way he's coming from. Maybe give it a second. If you don't see him coming this way, I would come around this way because he's probably trying to cut you off, and it's possible he's went all the way around the outside through the pallet to cut you off from getting the pallet. So at the end of the day, it is just how you loop it. But yeah, there's quite a few things that you can do with this. The exact same as if you were coming from in this way, right? You could come all the way around. You can go through here. Yeah, the killer might try and cut you off around that way. You can come back in and you can actually go back around the outside. If the killer's quite close to you, you can try and get a fast vault here if you're skilled enough. Getting fast vaults there are quite hard if you're on console and you don't know how to. The fast vaults are quite hard to get at areas like that. But yeah, that's this loop done. Let's move on to the next. Alright, we're looking at Cow Tree. This is a very, very good loop, but the killer can quite easy bait you into vaulting the window and go around. However, this loop is very good. similar to Shaq, I would actually really recommend not throwing it for as long as possible. Maybe in the same regards, as in if you're healthy and it's not a one-shot down killer, and there's more than 3 gens left, 4 or 5, I probably wouldn't chuck it. I would leave it till later because it's a very strong loop. So, this is the most optimal way to run this loop. So again, you're coming from this way, right? Fault the window, he comes round this side, and you come round here, and you continue doing that. Now, what you need to get good at, and here's a little tip for you, is fast faulting windows from close up, right? You need to learn, or need to try and learn. This is a side note, but you need to try and learn how close you can go before you get a fast fault, right? So, again, on PC, it's a bit easier. And something to note is, and it's very difficult to show you, but you actually get about a split second of time running into the wall itself before you get a fast fault. So you can actually run into the wall for ever so slightly and still get a fast fault. It won't slow you down. So we can probably get a fast fault from about here. So what you want to do is you want to hold your sprint button, or run button rather, and you want to run into the wall for a split second and then vault it. Right, so that looks a bit like this. You see how I ran into the wall for a second? Now what this allows you to do is this allows you to allow the killer to come further on you. So we'll try again, we'll see if we can do it a second time. Nah, I pressed R2 too early there. Try again. There we go. Right, so there is a perk you can use to actually increase your capability of doing that, and it is fixated. If you, I don't know if they actually put the Stranger Things perks in, so everyone can access them. I don't know, I can't remember because I've got the DLC. But yeah, so if you run fixated, which used to be self-aware, you actually increase your chances of being able to fast fault windows from closer up. So what happens, anyway, back to the loop, right? The killer comes all the way around here, you're walking, and then you get fast fault and you come round. The killer tries to cut you off and you come back this way. Now you're forced to run this loop, and now you can come here. Now because this is a very safe short loop, you can actually get this a lot of times, honestly. You can actually do this. I've got a video out where I tried to greed a Bubba for too long, and he ended up getting Bloodlust tier 2 or 3 and ended up getting a hit and down on me. But yeah, so that is probably how you'll be forced to run this loop. But then what you can also do, right, is if you come through this way, the killer might try and cut you back off, and then you're forced to come all the way around here again. You can, if you're sly. Now you have to pay attention to where the killer's facing, because you're actually, the killer can't see you here, right? The killer can't see you here. So as you're running around, if the killer's quite close, right, just as you're coming around this wall, you can actually get fast fault here, and the killer won't have seen you, and then you'll have to double back, and then it can force you back onto the right route. But it's harder to pull off, so I probably wouldn't recommend it straight away if you're learning. So that's cow tree done. Let's move on to the next. Alright, here we are. I don't know what you call this. I don't like running it. There's certain guys that can run it quite well, but here's the most likely thing that's going to happen on this loop, right? Is you run into it, you run around, you try to loop it, now you're stuck, right? If the killer comes from the pallet, and you're, say, here, right? If the killer comes from the pallet, you don't make it all the way around, the killer's going to catch you. Yeah, if you're here and the killer comes around this side, if you're here, you make the pallet, right? But you're not going to be here, because if the killer comes from that way, there's no way that you're making it all the way around. So this is a very difficult loop, in my opinion. Sometimes you can see the red stain through the walls and it makes it a bit easier. If the killer's not hiding his red stain, this is actually a very easy loop. But if you've got 1,000 hours in the game, then the chances are the killer's going to be hiding his red stain, and it makes it very difficult. Okay, so here's my recommendation, right? You come in from this side. What I would actually recommend you do is you just chuck the pallet straight away and you wait here. If the killer comes that way, you just vault it, you wait here. If the killer comes around here and breaks it, you just run. If you come in from this side, I would actually recommend you try and loop it at least once. And that's purely because what you don't want is you don't want to chuck it. Fortunately, the map layout of this map is pretty good, so if we did chuck it, we have this to run to, so it would be okay, but that's not always there, and sometimes this is a dead zone. And what you don't want is to chuck this pallet, he kicks it, you run this way, he follows you, you get hit. Yeah, kind of pointless, so I would at least try and run it once if you're brought in this way, and then that way, if you get hit, you can just leave and go to another loop or whatever. It's quite unsafe, so it's very difficult to run anyways. So let's move on to the next. So here's another jungle gym that you can find yourself at. And the way you want to do this one is you want to run in from this side. You want to follow all the way around. Just double check what way he's coming from. And then get the fast vault. Keep an eye out on what way he's coming. Whether he's going to cut you off this side or this side. Comes around this side. The problem is he's well within his capability to moonwalk back the way and try and cut you off here, and then by the time you get here you might get slapped, so just be careful of that. But if he comes round, you can try and get a fast vault back in, he tries to come back round, and then you have the opportunity to come round. Double check at the window which way he's coming from. If he tries to, he might even vault the window at this point honestly, which forces you back in here, but you can then run this side, run back into the pallet. If he does try and cut you off, what happens, right, is you could possibly get all the way over here. Something that's a bit higher skill, depending on how the killer is, you can kind of gauge whether you think he might fall for it. But if he cuts you off and you're forced to come around here, if he doesn't think he's going to get you to the window, he might start to go all the way around, and you can fake the window. And then if he comes back on himself, you can come back round this side. And then he might think you're going to vault the window again, so he comes back. Honestly, there's loads of mind games that can be played. But at the end of the day, that's the way you want to run this. You might be forced to just loop here. It's not the best loop in the world, but you might be forced to, and you have no other choice. Remember what I said earlier, pan your camera around. What you can actually do is, you can have your camera at such a way where you're not looking all the way behind you, but you're still looking in your direction. And see where the killer's going. So we've now come to the long wall jungle gym, which is the last tile. There is certain tiles that I'm not going to cover and that I haven't covered that are quite specific to specific maps, so I'm not going to cover them. At the end of the day, use your own judgment to how you believe you should loop them, given the knowledge I've shown you on the rest of the jungle gyms and the tiles. So same again, in through the pallet side, right, and you want to take the long wall. Now, with this specific vault, the chances are the killer's going to vault through this, honestly. And you're potentially wondering what way you should go, right? And if the killer vaults this, I would always recommend going this side, every time. Because it gives you a little bit more room. As soon as you see his red stain there, you vault this, he probably cuts back, and then it forces you this way. If he cuts on the inside, right, what you can do is you can come all the way around, back round the outside, and then get a fast vault here, and then you're back at the pallet, and then you can drop it if you need to. That is the way I would recommend running this. The only other variable really is if you don't come from this side. So if you come from the outside, right, again, you know which way the killer's going, then you essentially run the opposite way. If the killer comes round that side, right, I would actually recommend you go on the outside of this. And I would stay at this side until you're absolutely forced to loop around the pallet. Again, it's quite unsafe, so if you're here and the killer comes from the pallet side, you're getting hit, right? If he comes from this side, you can probably make the window again, honestly. But use your judgment on that. If he's got Bloodlust tier 1 or 2, then you're not making the window. But if you've only been in chase for a few seconds, 5-10 seconds, I'm pretty sure Bloodlust tier 1 starts after 15, then 30, then 45 seconds. So, yeah, if he's only on Bloodlust tier 1, then you can make the window again. If he's any higher than that, then yeah, you're going to have to chuck the pallet here. So that's pretty much how I would run that. That's everything pretty much covered. The last thing I'm going to teach you is one miscellaneous loop. Right, last thing I'm going to show you is miscellaneous loops, I guess. Your little loops with pallets on them. A lot of them are unsafe, but the safer ones, here's what I would do. This is just, you can essentially do whatever you like, but here's what I would do. I would run in the opposite direction to the way the killer's going, hugging it as tightly as possible, right? The killer cuts you off, you can go back the way. If you think that the killer is going to try and cut you off, but you're not 100% sure, you can kind of stop and do this movement, right? Which allows you to go back and forth. It takes a bit of time at getting used to, but it gives you quite a sharp turn. So if you come back this way, right, and you go that way, you know, back the way. If he keeps trying to do that to you, with smaller loops like this, the chances are the killer's probably going to swing through the first one. So if you come through and he's quite close to you, I wouldn't actually chuck it. I would let him swing through it, which is most likely going to happen. Something to keep an eye on is if you think the killer is going to swing, I actually wouldn't directly cut this corner. The reason being is because his lunge is probably long enough to still hit you. What I would do is if you think he's going to swing, I would come out running in a straight line ever so slightly until he's made the swing, and then you cut back in and go around. So it would kind of look a bit like this. Yeah, so you've went out, he's missed the swing, and then you can cut back round and continue looping. And then he will force you into any direction that he wants. And then if he goes round the back way, you can come through and take the window. So hope you enjoyed. That is just a quick tutorial. I say quick, it's probably going to be quite a long video actually, on how to loop most things. Any other loop, use the same ideas that I've shown you. See how you get on. Last tip I would recommend is Windows of Opportunity, which is the bottom right perk that you can see that I'm running. Especially if you're new. If you're good at the game, it's also very good. So hope you enjoyed. Alright, take it easy.